yúčciʔə, S'Klallam. Welcome, honored friends and relatives. It is good that you are here, and thank you for being here and visiting our land in this virtual reality space. We have some preliminary information we want to share with you. We, the S'Klallam and Klallam tribes, there are 3 of us, the Lower Elwha Klallam Tribe, the Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe, and the Port Gamble S'Klallam Tribe, 3 tribal governments. We represent the interests of our tribal citizens in matters of tribal culture. The Tamanowas Rock Sanctuary in Chimacum, Washington is an ancient sacred site to us, and it's listed on the Washington State Heritage Registry and on the National Registry of the Historic Places for cultural importance to the tribes. The Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe was able to purchase this site in 2012 with help from the Washington State Parks and the Jefferson Land Trust, which holds a permanent conservation easement on this property. Having become aware of some confusion about allowable uses for our Tamanowas Rock Sanctuary, we offer this clarification. It was always the intent of the 3 tribes to protect not only the habitat and natural resources on this property, but also to create a sanctuary in which the 3 tribes and their people could rekindle traditional spiritual practices. For us, the site is akin to a house of worship. Like any house of worship, it is open to all who wish to enter and passively enjoy its solitude and sense the sacredness there. But as in houses of worship of any denomination, it is not proper for outsiders to offer public field trips or to create their own forms of ceremony in this sanctuary space without special permission from the tribe. This is our sacred space, and we ask the public to respect our decision to limit gatherings and ceremonies there to those of our own choosing. We welcome the public to the Tamanowas Rock Sanctuary for quiet use and enjoyment, including bird watching, nature observation, walking, etc. We welcome the scientific and educational community to engage in non-destructive study in the sanctuary. Although public access is allowed, it is not a public park. The only gatherings and ceremonies that are allowed in the Tamanowas Rock Sanctuary are those organized and conducted by the S'Klallam and Klallam peoples. S'Klallam. Thank you, my honored friends. Since the early 1990s, the 3 S'Klallam and Klallam tribes and the local community have worked to save the Tamanowas Rock property from development. A coalition of Washington State Parks, Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe, and the Jefferson Land Trust worked together to negotiate and eventually purchase the property for permanent protection between 2009 and 2012. The property is now owned by the Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe, and Jefferson Land Trust holds a permanent conservation easement on this property. The conservation easement permanently protects the property's wildlife habitat, productive forest, scenic and open space qualities, and other natural values. While available for limited public access, the Tamanowas Rock Sanctuary is not an extension of Anderson Lake State Park. It is privately owned by the Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe. We ask that you please respect the park boundaries, understanding that the allowable uses are different in the sanctuary than they are in the park. The 3 tribes have established allowable uses for this site. You can see those permitted uses in the companion booklet, and it focuses on respect for its sacredness to the S'Klallam and Klallam peoples. To the S'Klallam and Klallam peoples, Tamanowas Rock is hallowed ground. Tamanowas Rock and its mysterious caves were used by our people for spiritual vision quests. Over time, forced renunciation of native spiritual practices nearly erased the rich indigenous ceremonial history from institutional memory. Those who remember its importance have sought to reclaim Tamanowas Rock and rekindle its sacred status, and the time has arrived. Rising up from the forest, Tamanowas Rock is like a natural cathedral, breathtaking in scale. The property is comprised of 80% second-growth forest of Douglas fir, grand fir, red alder, bigleaf maple, madrona, and western red cedar, with open fields and wetlands. Undergrowth includes salal, ocean spray or ironwood, willow, and sedges. Tamanowas means spirit power in yúčciʔə, or the S'Klallam language. The place itself holds power. The native peoples went there to discover their guardian spirit, the spirit that would guide them through the rest of their life, aiding them in times of trouble and giving them particular strengths and power in their lives. A spirit quest included 3 days of fasting at Tamanowas Rock and cleansing one's body in Anderson Lake. To this day, the S'Klallam and Klallam peoples make offerings and prayers of thanks when they visit Tamanowas Rock.
Tamanowas Rock provides a unique window into a time when the local geology and landscape were very different from what you see today. And in a larger context, it documents geologic events that led to the birth of the Cascade and Olympic mountain ranges. Geologically, Tamanowas Rock represents the beginning of the landscape that we have today, and has been important to people here since time immemorial. To understand this, we have to first say something about the plate tectonics. Planet Earth has an outer skin we call the lithosphere, which is made up of tectonic plates. These tectonic plates are moving on top of a viscous molten rock layer called the mantle. Here on the Olympic Peninsula, we're on the western edge of a tectonic plate called the North American plate, which is a continental plate. Over 50 million years ago, a slow eruption of lava in the ocean west of here created a massive basalt landmass on an oceanic plate called the Farallon Plate. Geologists have given this mass of rock the name the Silesia Terrane. The Farallon Plate was moving eastward toward the North American Plate, and where they converged, the more dense Farallon Plate subducted below the North American Plate. Through this natural tectonic plate movement, the Silesia Terrane, riding on the Farallon Plate, slowly moved east towards the North American continent and eventually landed and accreted onto the North American Plate. The Silesia Terrane was far too large and buoyant to be subducted, so the Farallon Plate subduction was stopped, and the portion of the Farallon Plate already subducted underneath the North American Plate broke off and continued its descent into the mantle. A new subduction zone eventually started west of the Silesia Terrane, creating the conditions that form the Cascade and Olympic Mountains. The new subduction zone also created volcanoes in what is now western Washington, above the leading edge of the subducting oceanic plate we call the Juan de Fuca Plate. These volcanoes, which are now all long gone, were ancestors of modern Cascade volcanoes like Mount Rainier, and included a volcano that formed Tamanowas Rock. Upon arriving at Tamanowas Rock, you can see somewhat chaotic, poorly sorted, fragmental features within the rock type, which is characteristic of a volcanic eruption called a block and ash flow. A block and ash flow is a type of pyroclastic eruption typically associated with the collapse of a dome volcano. Such domes are fairly small, steep-sided volcanoes, most less than a few thousand feet tall. Dome collapses will unleash a violent avalanche of exploding rock fragments, ash, and hot gas that travels downslope at up to 100 kilometers per hour and is usually confined to a stream channel or other topographic low. These block and ash flows rarely travel more than 10 kilometers from the source, so the fairly large size of the sub-rounded clasts and blocks in the rock that makes up Tamanowas Rock suggests the volcano is nearby. The ridge that includes Tamanowas Rock was actually once a valley that was filled by these ash flows. This is an example of topographic inversion. The ash flow was originally deposited in a valley, but after it cooled and solidified, the ash flow was more resistant to erosion than the rocks that formed the valley walls. During the 40+ million years following ash deposition, those walls have eroded away, leaving the solidified ash flow as a ridge. In the millions of years since the volcanic eruption that formed Tamanowas Rock, there have been several ice ages. The land was changed by ice, thousands of feet thick, slowly pouring south from vast continental glaciers until about 15,000 years ago. The ice and the meltwater from these glaciers carved and shaped Tamanowas Rock into what we see today. With the melting of the glaciers, creeks and rivers formed, which quickly became spawning grounds for salmon. Following the salmon were people. Overhangs and caves provided shelter for early travelers and residents, with views down across the valleys and out to the water. Geologically, Tamanowas Rock represents the beginning of the landscape we have today, and it has been important to people here since time immemorial.
In 1976, Tamanowas Rock was listed in the Washington Heritage Register as having significant archaeological interest. Many similar Coast Salish canoe culture flood stories suggest that peaks such as Tamanowas Rock provide safe haven during tsunamis and other flooding events. Tribal peoples packed their families and supplies into dugout cedar canoes, and as the water rose, they made long ropes out of roots to secure their canoes around the rock and wait until the water receded. The most recent such event occurred about 300 years ago.